Happy Easter, everyone. It's Reverend Mike Capron from the First Presbyterian Church of Elmwood Park. It's Easter Sunday, and we're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus the Christ. I'm going to be referencing a lot of biblical texts from my sermon today, but perhaps the central one will be Mark 16, 1 through 8, or at least it sets the tone. So here we go. When the Sabbath was over on that first Easter Sunday, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might go and anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. And they asked each other, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance to the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. My friends, this is the word of the Lord. Well, there are a lot of things that Jesus has saved me from over the years, and the most recent is that he saved me from preaching a bad Easter sermon today, or at least I hope he did. I have to have Bible readings prepared and some notion of a theme long before I actually sit down to prepare the sermon. So let me share with you the vague theme I had in mind for this service. And it references some other biblical texts. There's one point where Peter makes this bold declaration right before Jesus is arrested. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And then Jesus tells him that before the cock crows, he will betray him 3 times. Pretend he didn't even know him. And I was going to speak about how Peter's bravado in this incident represents an immature faith. And then I was going to look at Paul. In Philippians 1, he has a kind of a mystical detachment. "If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, yet which I shall choose, I cannot say. I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart, to die, and be with Christ, for that is far better." I've always admired the way Paul was able to be at this faithful balance point where dying and living were more or less equal options. He was prepared to do whichever would serve Christ better. And I was going to suggest that Paul's view represented a more mature faith than Peter's outburst, one that we should aspire to. And as far as that goes, there's some truth in it. I'll stand by that. I wouldn't be the first preacher to think about the Bible and extract some ideas from it and then preach on the ideas that I got. But it is far better to actually preach the Bible. And in truth, that would have been a tepid sermon at the end of what we call Jesus' Passion. There is that which must be said about death. We cannot avoid it. Sometimes we think about Easter that way. We think about it as meaning that we will never die. We pretend that we will never have to face death. Not really. But it doesn't actually mean that, does it? Jesus had to face death. That is what the cross is all about. Jesus was crucified. He died. He also rose from the dead. And so will we. We will die, but we will also rise as he rose. We can, perhaps on this day of all days, at least a little bit, laugh at death. However, we cannot avoid it. We will all die. But perhaps we should choose carefully how and when we talk about it. I've got a silly scenario running through my head. Young parents take their infant to the doctor to ask how the baby is doing. "He is dying," says the doctor. The parents gasp and ask, "When?" And the doctor replies, "It's hard to say, but likely within 100 years. Saying that which is factual is important, but it isn't everything. So let us look at the context of Peter's bold assertion. Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. We know in hindsight that his actions will fail to live up to his words. But what else could he have said? You know, Jesus, you've been acting weird lately, and I may have to take some time to reevaluate our relationship. That is not an improvement. Or how about this? Well, I can't really know what I will do if it gets dangerous, but I'll do my best, Jesus. That is safer, but it lacks a certain emotional punch. So here's the thing I commend Peter for. He loves Jesus. He loves him passionately. He doesn't want to be the sort of person who plays it safe. He wants to be heroic and loyal. He wants to go the distance, and that counts for something. This week I read a reflection from a chaplain who has been noticing the difference between generations of college students. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996, and this is what Rev Colquitts wrote about them. For me and my peers in the early 2000s, we understood ourselves as called and equipped to change the world. We had been raised on self-esteem, and now was the time to spread our wings. The world had big problems, but they were solvable, and we would be the generation to get it done. The last of the millennials would have been in college during the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, and their aspirations, both for their career and a better world, in many ways dramatically stalled out. Like Peter, they found that the reality of their situation didn't match up with their passionate aspirations. Perhaps the legacy of those years explains why the next generation, called Generation Z, entered college with a different attitude. Rev Colquitts' observations again. Today's students are still concerned with big societal level issues, but their attitude is decidedly less sanguine with respect to themselves and the world. They are said to lack grit and resilience and to be weak in the face of trial and unprepared for adulthood. Though a caricatured version of this critique can go too far, my own experience confirms that there may be something here. The dominant chorus of "you are strong" has been replaced with the subtle dirge of "you are weak." Now, obviously, he's generalizing. You have to generalize if you're going to have to talk about a whole generation. But if his observations are all on target, then that saddens me. In the midst of his passion, Peter promised more than he could actually deliver. But I prefer that to a mindset which assumes that nothing can change, that nothing good will happen, that there is no hope, and that I'm not capable of facing what I'm going to face. Now, I need to clearly state that I am in no way blaming Generation Z for this. They did not make the world they inherited. People like me did. But let's take another look at Philippians 1 and the Apostle Paul. If you read the whole chapter, you will find that my mental conception of him as mystically detached from life isn't right. He has plenty of reasons to feel sad and hopeless. He is in prison, as he writes to the church in Philippi, but he does not write like a depressed person. Here are verses 3 through 6. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, and being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. He is able to see that God can redeem evil for God's good purposes. I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. And while he is not afraid of death, he plans to live and continue his ministry. I know that I will remain and continue with you all. for your progress and joy in the faith, so that you may have ample cause to glory in Christ Jesus because of my coming to you again. What's beautiful about this is that, like Peter, Paul has a passion for life, and he is passionate about serving Christ. But there is a maturity shown in Paul. To be fair, his words come at least 20 years after Peter's. He has enough years under his belt for his faith to have grown. But his passion matches Peter's. His words are not bravado. They represent a mature faith, the faith of a person who realizes that his own life and death are not the most important thing. For, as he says, to live is to serve Christ, but to die is to be with Christ, and that is gain. It's hard to arrive at that sort of a point in your faith life. It takes a great deal of work of God's Spirit combined with a lifetime of faithful response. I don't care how strong your faith is, however, death is still a bit frightening. You can see that in the shock of the women in Mark 16 on that first Easter. They go to the garden to do their sad duty. They will prepare Jesus' body for its final rest. They do not look forward to it, but it is the right thing to do, so they go. It is hard, but it is predictable, natural. They understand it. They do not understand the absence of the stone, nor the angelic messenger who tells them that despite his death, Jesus is on the move, that they should tell the others and go meet him in Galilee. Eventually, they will do as instructed, but not at that moment. They just flee. You see, it was their first Easter. Heck, it was the first Easter there ever was, so we can cut them some slack. But for most of us, this is not our first Easter. It is still amazing. However, we sort of know what to expect. We kind of get it. Like Jesus, we will die. But like Jesus, we will rise from the dead. The dying part? Yeah, still not fun. But we started dying the day we were born. Now the resurrection. I just have to imagine that that is lots of fun. In many Easter stories, Jesus seems playful. He plays games with Mary Magdalene and the two disciples walking to Emmaus, where they converse with him, but they are kept from recognizing him at first. And then he shows up in the locked room, wishing them peace and saying how they can go ahead and touch his healed wounds. I'm going to say it one more time, because I want the good news to really sink in. Life is hard. Bad things happen to us. We can get shaken in our confidence. We can overpromise things. And we all die. But in the words of 1 Corinthians 15, Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have died. For since death came through a person, the resurrection of the dead also comes through a person. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ will all be made alive. And when we are raised, our wounds will be healed. Wounds of the body, wounds of the mind, and wounds of the spirit. And as those who will enter the kingdom of heaven will be like children, I believe the resurrection will be fun. We will have new eyes to look at a new world, filled with love and with joy. Happy Easter, my friends. Amen.